What's up, guys? Welcome to the pre-podcast. This is the part that only you guys watching on YouTube and Facebook actually get to see. A little bit of quality time before we start the podcast. But today I am going to get into it a lot sooner. I'm not going to ramble on. Although I do have to tell you, and I wish I could show you. Do you think I can? I don't know. I don't want to stand on this chair though. That sounds like chaos. Can you guys see this? My awesome Harry Potter jammy bottoms. Okay. Alright, that was probably the most terrifying thing I've done in a while. This chair is super wobbly. But yeah, I'm comfortable for today's podcast. I'm in my Harry Potter jammies. I got my peppermint tea. I'm ready to knock this thing out of the park, yo! So, let's go ahead and get started on our episode of Project Phoenix podcast. Right, let me pull up GarageBand, get the intro music going. Eventually, I am going to have to get an actual intro, because each episode I have a different music, and I feel like it's confusing. Anyways, alright, let's get this show on the road. Okay, why isn't that working? Come on, guys. Alright, let's try this again. Let's get this show on the road. Hey, everyone. Welcome to the Project Phoenix podcast. I am so excited to have you guys here today. I hope you guys are pulling the Tony the Tiger thing and feeling great. I realize that was really dumb, but come on, just let me have that one. I was feeling pretty smart when I came up with it, and then I did it, and then I'm like, oh, well, that's... Okay, so, oh man, so really quick, exciting news. I just realized this today, but today's the 14th. By the time you guys see this, it'll probably be the 15th or 16th, but today's the 14th, yesterday was the 13th. And not only was it Friday the 13th, but 13th is also a pretty significant number for me, because I leave next month on January the 13th to Japan. I think I mentioned this a couple times before in my last two episodes, but my boyfriend and I are moving to Japan on January 13th. I'm going back to my home country after living in California for 10 years, so I'm really excited about that. For some reason, I'm drooling from the corners of my mouth, and I don't know why. So let me wipe that spittle off my face. But yeah, that's kind of crazy. You know, when my boyfriend and I first talked about moving to Japan in June, that felt almost so unreal. You know what I mean? So, excuse me, that's crazy. I can't believe it's happening, and it's only less than a month away now. My boyfriend and I are literally counting down the days. We were so excited to go. But that's beside the point. That's not the point of this podcast. We're going to go ahead and get started in today's podcast. In today's podcast, we're going to be talking about taking an emotional dump. So I cry at everything, which might be a really crazy way to start this whole thing. But I cry at everything, and I kid you not, I'm a very emotional person, and I'm not afraid to admit that. I cry when I'm sad, I cry when I'm mad, I cry when I'm frustrated, I cry when I'm happy, I cry when I look at my dog and I get super overwhelmed by how much I love him. I cry over everything. It kind of reminds me of being Brendan Fraser's character in Bedazzled. I don't know if any of you guys have ever seen that movie. Great movie, check it out. It's actually a remake of a 1960s original with Peter Cook and Dudley Moore, which is also obviously a classic and amazing film. But I also like the remake. I don't know if anyone else did, but I like Brendan Fraser, and Elizabeth Hurley, who plays the devil, is pretty damn hot. So Love that movie. Really funny. But the movie has Brendan Fraser as the main character, and he has a crush on this lady that he works with, and he wants to get her attention. And so he meets Elizabeth Hurley's character, who plays the devil, and she's like, hey, I'll grant you any 7 wishes you want. You just have to give me your soul after I grant you 7 wishes. So Brendan Fraser goes with it, and so she starts granting him these wishes, which all involve something to do with this lady that he's just in love with. And one of the wishes he asks for is for her to, Elizabeth Hurley's character, the devil's character, to make his character more in tune with his emotions. So it's pretty emotional, because the girl loves sensitive guys. So in this basic, wish, this little piece of the film, she makes him emotional, and so they go into this scene where they kind of play out how this works out. And they're at the beach, Brendan Fraser's character now, who's super emotional, and this girl that he likes, and they're sitting on the beach and everything's going good. She loves the fact that he's super sensitive, and then things just go wrong. Sorry, the mother-in-law's upstairs walking around, so ignore the creaking and the toilet pipes going. But anyway, so toilet pipes. Anyway, so he's emotional, and everything starts falling apart because he's way too emotional for her. She just can't handle how sensitive he is. He cries over the sunset, he cries over the dolphins, he cries over everything. And so at the end of that scene, the girl ends up this guy who's walking on the beach, super manly, muscular guy, ends up coming over to her and start talking to her, and she walks away with him, and that's how that scene ends. But that was a really long explanation to say that I feel like I'm Brendan Fraser's character from Bedazzled in that one scene. Yeah, so I don't know if you guys have ever seen it. Go watch it. Bedazzled, great movie. Either the classic or the remake. I'm specifically talking about the remake, but I think one of the reasons I'm trying to think of how I want to word this. I think one of the reasons why I'm so emotional now is because I used to not be. Well, let me explain. So when I was a kid, my parents were going through a lot. My dad had he was an emotional roller coaster. My mom was never home. So I didn't have a lot of people to rely on emotionally as a kid. So I spent a lot of time kind of holding it in. Even if I was sad or angry or happy, I didn't want to make anyone else unhappy. So I would just hold it in. Even my mom remarks every once in a while that I wasn't a very, I wouldn't cry that much, even as a kid. And as a teenager, I think that turned into more of, I didn't cry so much as a teenager, but I was very emotional, but in an angry sort of way. I was one of those emotions where I would get so angry I would punch the walls. And I would scream at people until they felt bad. It was a lot of anger. I would do one of those annoying teenager things. I'm sure all of you, if this is not you, I'm sure you had somebody as a friend or somebody in your class who was like this, who would, get mad or sad over the smallest things and just run away. That was me. I was very obnoxious that way. But it was probably more because I didn't really know how to express my emotions very well, because I didn't do that much growing up. Nobody ever taught me how to properly express my emotions. So as a teenager, it turned into anger, and when something did upset me, I just ran away because I didn't know what to do. And as I got older, it became another problem. I became an entrepreneur, I became a business owner, and in that world, you're taught that crying or showing any kind of emotions is a vulnerability. A leader should always be a leader, and your peers or your not colleagues, but the people working for you should never see you cry, because then they, it makes them feel uncertain about you, or it's just, as a business owner or business leader, you should never show your vulnerabilities. And that's what I learned. So as a kid, I didn't have anybody to turn to emotionally, so I didn't, and I just held it in. As a teenager, I didn't cry that much, but it turned into anger, because I didn't know how to process my emotions, so I would just run away from friends and get upset over everything super easily. And then as an entrepreneur, when I got older, you don't show your vulnerability. You're a leader. You don't show vulnerability. At least that is what I believed, because that is what I thought a good leader was. So I emotionally constipated myself. I didn't know how to process emotions properly, which is really unfortunate, because it really messed me up. But one day, I don't know what happened. I don't know if my body was like, this is enough. I can't hold this much stress. You have to let this go, or this is going to destroy you. But one day the floodgates opened. And I remember spending a few days just crying. I couldn't stop crying. It was as if all that tear, all that pent-up emotion, all that frustration I had just came pouring out of me. And I haven't stopped being emotional or vulnerable ever since. If something bothers me and I want to cry, I cry now. And when I want to laugh, I laugh. I let my emotions be what it is. It was recently I read this article that said there's a reason human beings are programmed to cry, which I thought was fascinating. In this article, it talked about the fact that crying actually has benefits. There's actually physical benefits to crying. It helps release pain. It helps release toxins in your body caused by stress. It kind of puts you in that, what's the word I'm looking for? I can't even think. Elated state. I have it. Enhances our mood. I have it written. That's why notes are there. It enhances our mood, releases our toxins, all that good stuff. And so crying actually has a physical benefit, and there's a reason why we're programmed to do so. Just making sure. If you look at me on the camera, I keep looking over at my screen, looking at my notes, just because I want to make sure that I'm catching everything correctly. But in this article, it talked about how it's the body's most natural way to release stresses. And it also says that it decreases the chance of cardiovascular diseases or other stress-related diseases, which no one ever talks about that. Everyone always talks about the bad stuff about crying, how ashamed we should be about it, but nobody ever talks about how beneficial it is. None of us are ever taught, of the importance of showing our emotions. We're always taught to hide it. I mean, as a society, I feel as if we're so accustomed to acting like it's it's something to be embarrassed about. You know, when we think about women, right, there's a lot of jokes that women are emotional, women cry too much. And then we talk about guys. And I feel bad for men. You know, growing up, how many men heard "stiffen that upper lip, soldier, man up"? You know, because guys aren't supposed to cry, guys aren't supposed to feel vulnerable, guys aren't supposed to have emotions. And guys aren't supposed to be vulnerable. It's complete bullshit. All of those feelings, those release of negative energy, the act of crying, that's all a part of who we are, what we're programmed to do, yet somehow throughout the course of time, it became something to be ashamed about, both for women and both for women and men. And it makes me sad. It hurts me, because I think about, you know, even as a teenager, when I saw a lot of kids my age in high school, you know, there's so many people who had emotional difficulties, but they hid it so well because they didn't want to show it to other people. They didn't know how to process it. And then I go into workplaces as an adult and I meet all these people who still don't understand how to process emotions. So they turn to other things. They turn to drugs, they turn to alcohol, they turn to other ways to help deal with these emotions that they don't know how to deal with, because we've shamed our society to believe that our emotions, our vulnerabilities, our tears are something to be ashamed of. I just recently read a book called The Book of Joy. I think, no, Book of Happiness? No, the Book of Joy. Yeah, it's called The Book of Joy. I talked about it, I think I touched on it a little bit in the last podcast episode, but it was conversations between Desmond Tutu and the Dalai Lama. And in it, they touch on the fact that Desmond Tutu is a big crybaby. He cries a lot. And he talks about it in there. But here's this world-renowned guy. He's a Nobel Prize winner. He's looked up to, revered in the spiritual community. He's an activist for human rights. He's respected, highly respected individual, and yet he is not afraid to shed a tear. When he's upset, when he's sad, when he's angry, when he's happy, he will freely let his emotions go. I mean, the guy is bros with Dalai Lama. And he's not afraid to let his emotions show. So I'm just saying, if Desmond Tutu, one of the most renowned human rights activists, Nobel Prize winner, bros with the Dalai Lama, highly respected individual, is not afraid to shed a tear or two, why are we holding on to that emotion? Why do we hold on to these emotions? You know, I think I like to say that I believe, that's such a weird way to put it, but I believe that all of us could benefit from a good emotional shit. You know what I mean? Like, I think all of us need to take a good emotional dump. Give ourselves an emotional enema and just release that shit. You know what I mean? Just take an emotional dump. I think it could really benefit us all just by doing that. So, next time you're feeling emotional, or next time you're feeling vulnerable, I don't know if anyone has ever given you permission to feel that emotion, but I'm gonna give that to you right now. I know I'm a stranger who's wearing Harry Potter pajama pants, and if you guys don't know what I'm talking about, on the podcast. I think I touched on that on the behind the scenes of this podcast episode on Facebook and YouTube. But I'm wearing Harry Potter pajama pants. You don't even have to go there. I'll just tell you. But here I'm just a girl in her Harry Potter pajama pants recording this podcast in her mother-in-law's basement. And I'm giving you permission to feel vulnerable, to cry if you have to. You know, there's a reason crying is encouraged during meditation. In fact, there's a lot of people who do meditation, and when they get to that point where they're doing it properly and they're in that zone, they start crying. They just can't stop crying, and it's because when you're meditating, you free up a lot of that tension, a lot of that. You just become, oh, I don't know what, loose. You become free. And that's when oftentimes a lot of people just start crying. Everything they've been holding in, they release. And it's encouraged in meditation. And I think that's really beautiful. But I really want to give you guys permission to feel vulnerable, to cry, because I think it's necessary. Give yourself that emotional enema and just let that shit go. Just let it go. You don't have to cry at everything like I do, or Brendan Fraser, or Desmond Tutu. You don't have to cry at everything. But don't hold it in. Don't hold it in. I know society has shamed us for so long, saying that we should, crying is a sign of weakness, but it isn't. Crying is just a way, our body's way, natural way, to help release the stress toxins out of our body. And that's a really important thing. I was reading an article the other day that said that the heart attack rate is increasing in people under 50, which heart attacks for a long time were considered to be an old man's disease. And we got 30-year-olds dropping dead from heart attacks, which is insane, the increased amount of rate. Now, they talk about it being linked to things like sedentary lifestyle, food choices, and all that, which plays a part. But another big thing and factor is stress. On top of being sedentary, on top of eating shit food, we're also stressed. We are a society of stressed individuals who don't know how to process their emotions. So, one of the things that I say is most relieving is crying. So, after this podcast or whatever, go sit in a room somewhere. Go sit in your bathtub. Like what was that character's name from Arrested Development? He's married to the main guy's sister. What is his name? He's the one with the glasses. Tobias. Remember that scene? He's like never nude, and he's wearing socks and he's crying in the tub. Do that. Pull a Tobias. Go cry in the bathroom. Let that emotional shit go, guys. Let it flow out of you. That's my message for tonight. And I was just thinking about it. I think it's really important. I'll say, yeah, I cry a lot, but I feel immensely better than when I did when I was a kid, when I was a teenager, when I was in my early 20s. Because I cry and then I let it go. I don't hold on to it, because once it's out, it's out. It's easier for me to process. It gives me a clearer head. My heart rate goes down. My blood pressure goes down. I'm not as stressed. It's awesome. It's a really good natural remedy. Man. Yeah, so that's kind of my message for this episode. Which take an emotional dump, basically, is what I'm trying to say. So, okay, well, I'm gonna go because I don't know what else to talk about, because I kind of said what I wanted to say and then some. So, again, guys, thank you so much for tuning in to the Project Phoenix podcast. Excuse me, the tea. I'm very gassy. Smart fart took the elevator. If you guys liked this podcast, if you're listening to this on podcast, please hit the subscribe button. If you're watching this on YouTube or Facebook, also hit that subscribe button and hit that thumbs up button. Leave a comment down below if you're on YouTube and Facebook, and let me know, when is the last time you guys cried? I'd love to have a discussion in there. And what is your views? Were you guys taught as kids that showing your emotions and being vulnerable was a negative thing? And what are your thoughts on the whole thing? What do you guys think about the whole crying and feeling vulnerable? I'd love to know what your thoughts are, so leave that comment down below as well. And if this video or podcast helped you in any way, or you know somebody that it might help, please don't be afraid to share it. And because it'll help me out, and it might help other people out as well. Remember that no matter where you are in life, you guys will always have an opportunity as long as your heart is beating and as long as you dare to rise. And with that, I wish you guys a wonderful, wonderful week, because it's Saturday and then tomorrow's Sunday. So the rest of your Sunday and the rest of your week, I hope you guys have a fantastic one. And I love you guys so much. And I will see you in the next episode.